Hi, my name is Juniper. I'm a transgender man who uses he/they pronouns and a member of the Queer and Trans Youth Council of Santa Cruz County. I'm here to explain to you what you may or may not understand about gender, biological sex, being transgender, and some of the struggles of transgender people. You may wonder how you can help, or simply don't know what the definitions and terminology are. But today, I will help provide you with answers to those questions. Let us start with the big question, often misunderstood, misconstrued, and misused terms. What is sex? How does it differentiate from gender and what causes it to? Well, the World Health Organization says gender interacts with, but is different from sex, which refers to the different biological and physiological characteristics of females, males, and intersex persons, such as chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive organs. Gender and sex are related to but different from gender identity. Gender identity refers to a person's deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond to the person's physiology or designated sex at birth. Your sex is often characterized as either male or female, but in fact, sex itself can take on so many different biological variations, such as intersex. Intersex is a term for people who are born with differences in their sex traits and/or reproductive anatomy. There are so many different possibilities via hormones, genitalia, internal anatomy, and even chromosomes. Gender, however, is a social construct. Gender refers to the socially constructed roles, expressions, and identities. Gender does not exist naturally or in a vacuum, but is instead created through socialization, education, peers, and media. That doesn't discredit the validity of gender, however. Gender has a deep connection to the oppression and marginalization a variety of groups may face, with intersectional ties to race, culture, quality of life, and status. Oftentimes, gender is represented with a man and a woman, a binary structure. But because gender is constructed, it is so much more than that. Many identities lie between, outside, and away from man and woman. You want to know more about gender expression, but what is cis? What is trans? What is non-binary? What is gender dysphoria even? It's okay if you're not already familiar with the terminology, but I'll help you understand. To be cisgendered is to identify with the gender you were assigned at birth, which may also align with the sex commonly associated with that gender. Transgender is an umbrella term that describes someone whose gender identity or their sense of being a woman, man, or something else does not match the gender associated with the sex that they were assigned at birth. The Human Rights Campaign details in their glossary that non-binary is an adjective describing a person who does not identify exclusively as a man or a woman. Non-binary people may identify as being both a man and a woman, somewhere in between, or falling completely out of those categories entirely. While many also identify as transgender, not all non-binary people do. Non-binary can also be an umbrella term encompassing identities such as agender, bigender, genderqueer, or gender fluid. Gender dysphoria, however, is a sense of dissatisfaction between their gender identity and their body, expression, or social connections. It's not exclusive to trans people, but it's most often seen in them. Gender dysphoria can feel like an instinctual wrongness in someone's body. It can be genitalia, breast size, physical appearance or build. It can be a disconnect to their birth name, pronouns, or unhappiness with being referred to as their gender assigned at birth. They may express the desire to change their bodies or engage in different social behaviors, and if they're not able to, it could cause them great distress. Gender dysphoria can lead people to suffer from anxiety and even attempt suicide. Gender-affirming care can help alleviate these symptoms, though, which is why it's so important that it be provided to transgender people. But how is gender expressed or represented? Throughout the world and its various cultures, gender and how it's interpreted is tied up in behaviors, religions, spiritual practices, appearance, dress, and activities. But unique genders and gender expressions have been represented throughout history amongst numerous cultures across continents. Being transgender, non-binary, or gender diverse isn't a new phenomenon cultivated by modern society. Hundreds of indigenous societies held various different views on gender. One native Hawaiian culture has a traditionally highly respected identity called mahu, whom are people that encapsulate both a male and female spirit. Within Jewish culture, there have been many as 8 or more genders recognized even by law. Neopronouns are a phenomenon largely interpreted as a result of the modern era. However, they have existed for as long as language incorporated any pronouns in any form. Neopronouns are pronouns that don't align with she, her, he, him, or they, them. They are limitless and can be derived from so many means. They can be taken from words such as cat, cat self, or they're entirely different sets of pronouns such as they, zer, or fey, fair. And yet, despite all this, we still find ourselves wrapped up in the idea that pink is for girls, blue is for boys, dolls are for girls, cars are for boys. Men don't wear makeup, women do. However, we invented this structure. There is no inherent relation between pink and girl nor blue and boy. These are gender processes formed by thousands of years of societal expectations. And because they're made up, they're so different amongst different people. And while a person's gender expression may commonly reflect their identity based on these standards, that isn't always true. Gender expression doesn't equal gender identity. Gender is fluid. It can be ice, gas, or water. Although someone could identify as a binary man, they could still partake in traditionally feminine things or dress. I'm wearing a skirt, and I'm still a man. Since we constructed gender expression and these gender processes, they're constantly developing and changing. Just a little over 100 years ago, women weren't allowed to wear pants in the US, and now it's commonplace.
They're wearing a dress, so they must be a woman. That must be a man. They're wearing pants.
Someone's expression is never indicative of their identity, and they don't have to express themselves in any particular way to be valid. Even if someone doesn't strictly adhere to the gender binary, they don't have to present neutral or only use neutral pronouns to be non-binary. And nor does any transgender or non-binary person require a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to be transgender. Gender dysphoria doesn't equal transgender, and transgender doesn't equal gender dysphoria. We know what gender dysphoria is, but transitioning is making changes so as to live as your true gender identity and feel gender euphoria. This can be social, medical, or otherwise. It can be using a different set of pronouns, dressing differently, or using gender-affirming medical care, such as hormone replacement therapy or having surgeries done to achieve your goals. Transitioning is about alleviating gender dysphoria and promoting gender euphoria. And transitioning is different for everybody. The trans in transgender does not mean to simply go from one point to the other, but rather moving beyond. Additionally, not all transgender people want to go through the means to be as biologically close to their sexual counterparts, whether or not they have a binary identity. For example, the effects of gender-affirming hormone replacement therapy might be unappealing to them, or changing their genitalia may be unwanted, but that doesn't make them any less valid in their personal identity. That brings us back to gender expression being unique to everybody. That's why it's important to use gender-neutral language when referring to people you haven't yet learned the pronouns or language preferences of. How someone looks, acts, or talks will never be a definitive statement of their gender. Detransitioning, alternatively, is when someone who formerly or still does identify as transgender reverses their social or medical transitions. This can often be from backlash and discrimination that they may potentially face in their community, or because they simply don't align with the identity that they previously did. It is often claimed by people that are restricting the rights of transgender people that detransition is common, especially after undergoing irreversible medical changes. However, this is untrue. A study conducted in January of 2023 from 1,989 individuals who had received genitalia-altering surgeries found that only 6 people regretted their decision. And despite this, gender-affirming care is denied to transgender people, and the validity of their identities is minimized as impulsive or immature. Like I said, there is an argument that being transgender is simply a short-lived phase, influenced by the internet and manipulative sources. But research shows that the majority of transgender youth maintain and align with their identities throughout their progression to adulthood and onward. Nearly half of all transgender people have faced verbal harassment due to how they identify, and more than half enduring abuse from intimate partners, including but not limited to coercion, physical harm, and even sexual violence. To make matters worse, nearly half have faced violence from law enforcement and healthcare professionals. Even schools are a space where trans people are threatened, a whopping 80% facing significant abuse at school, and 30% of that being from educators themselves. And this is only what's reported. All of this, including a lack of gender-affirming healthcare, causes 1 in 5 transgender or non-binary youth to attempt suicide, with higher rates amongst transgender people of color. Transgender people are disproportionately affected by verbal, physical, and sexual violence, despite being painted as immoral or even predators by transphobic individuals. The oppression of transgender people limits so much of their opportunities and restricts so much of their life. In 2024 alone, at least 400 anti-trans bills are still being considered and more are actively proposed. These are including but not limited to restricting bathroom use, refusing access to the appropriate sports teams, forced outing at home and school, and the villainization of protecting your child's identity, and so much more. What can be done to help? You can help transgender people both directly and indirectly, politically and personally. Speak out in support of transgender rights. Challenge people you know and spaces you are in if they are engaging in transphobic behavior through remarks, jokes, actions, and even casual conversation. This shows to transgender people that they are listened to and accepted, and willingness to educate others shows your dedication to the cause. Introduce yourself with your pronouns. Ask for someone else's. Display your pronouns online, in an office space, on your clothes, or elsewhere. These small acts can show how you are being mindful of people's preferences and promotes the idea that you are friendly to transgender people. Be mindful of your language. Use gender-neutral language. Not everyone are ladies and gentlemen, and not everyone wants to be referred to that way. You never know how someone identifies based on perceived factors. Support transgender friends and individuals close to you. Allow them to feel safe sharing their feelings with you, expressing their conflicts or experiences with discrimination, and make it clear you are there for them. It could change lives, even save them. In your community, you can make a difference by speaking or being present at school board meetings, volunteer groups, libraries, or local organizations. On a wider scale, you can call your elected officials and voice your concerns and what needs to be improved. You can educate others about laws, policies that are actively negatively affecting transgender people locally or on a wider scale. Push to change them and help advocate. Instead, work to pass laws that have a positive impact. Laws that protect transgender people, especially youth, outlawing discrimination and providing resources. If you are in a position to educate others, train them on these concerns. Make them aware of transgender issues and provide them with the necessary means to make a difference as well. We don't just want tolerance. We want active, ongoing inclusivity. Today, you've learned about the differences between biological sex and gender, as well as some basic definitions of vocabulary for terms such as transgender, non-binary, gender dysphoria, and more. We went over gender expression, what it is, where it's come from, how it's developed, and just how different it can be for everyone. We went over transition, medical and social, and then we briefly saw into the struggles of transgender people. The intention of this video was to educate on subjects that are commonly misunderstood and to raise awareness for the issues that currently plague transgender and gender diverse youth. If you need to at any point in time, this video will always be available for you to brush up on your knowledge again and recommend to other people as a vessel for learning. We hope you enjoyed.